first question, could you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Ariana Kincaid.
And whereabouts in the world are you?
I am in West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia, in the United States.
And is your name really Ariana?
It really is.
You're listening to Crowd Science on the BBC World Service. I'm Caroline Steele, and I don't normally question everything people say. Could you explain to our listeners why I'm doubting what your real name is?
Because I have been in and judged liars' contests.
Ariana is the world's second biggest liar. And we're joined by this untrustworthy character thanks to a question from one of you listeners.
Hi, I'm Anthony. I'm in the capital of Cambodia, Phnom Penh.
And what's your question for Crowd Science?
My question for Crowd Science is, why do we lie and how conscious are we of the lies that we tell? We all do it at some point during the day or during our lives in general. So is this influenced by culture or, say, the context that we tell certain lies?
Anthony's moved all over the world for work, and each time he's had to learn a new rule book for lying.
At first it was difficult to suss out who was lying and when, but then it gradually goes back to culture. You can understand. Here in Cambodia, people are very nice, they're just extremely smiley and they'll say the lovely things about you, but it takes a bit longer to suss out a bit more what's underneath the surface.
Anthony has an adorable 2-year-old daughter who's just learning to tell fibs.
She went over to the friend's house a couple of days ago, and she made up this wonderful lie. She said she was bored of being there for whatever reason, and she started saying, "Oh, I want to go home and sleep." So her mother took her home to sleep, and of course she wasn't sleepy at all. She just wanted to come home.
Aww,
so it was,
that's very sweet.
I was dead impressed. Yeah.
Top tip on how to get out of social situations from Anthony's daughter there. Pretend you're sleepy and hopefully your mum will take you home. I think my friends would describe me as a bit honest, if they were being polite. Very blunt, if they're being honest. I don't like lies, including white ones. I will tell them to get by in awkward social situations, but I try and avoid it. I personally think life would be much better if we all always tell the truth and know exactly where we stand with each other. On this show, we're going to untangle the web that is the psychology of lying. So when does this deception begin? Anthony's fibbing 2-year-old suggests lying starts at a very young age. Professor Kang Lee from the Department of Applied Psychology and Human Development at the University of Toronto is an expert on kids' lying strategies.
According to scientific evidence, children begin to lie around 2.5 years of age.
So isn't that basically when children are learning to speak?
Yes, indeed. They just barely are able to put words together to make a sentence. They start to lie.
What is it about a 2.5-year-old that means they can lie? Like, what is it that we need to be able to lie?
So what is needed is the child has to understand that different people have different knowledge about the world. Another thing that's extremely important is the ability to inhibit. So that's the ability to inhibit the truth and then switch over to come up with an alternative truth. These two abilities are the essential skills we have to develop as humans when we function in our society. So lying is sort of like a good sign. Your child has arrived at this kind of important milestone of development.
So we should sort of be celebrating a child's first lie rather than sort of scorning them.
Oh, definitely. So this is a moment for you to be very proud of your child.
Do you have kids?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember a first lie and what your reaction was like?
So I brought him to my lab to see whether or not he would lie about transgression, which is he's peeking at the answer to a game, and he did. So I was very happy. He said, my kid can lie.
You must be one of the only parents who are like, yes, my kid lied. He's doing fantastically well. He's developing fantastically.
Yes, indeed.
So as we develop, how do our lies change? So is a 2-year-old lying in a different way from a 7-year-old, or is it basically a skill that sort of stays with us for life?
At about 2 years of age, it's only a third of kids, 2.5-year-old, would lie. At 4, more than 80% of kids would lie. By about 7, almost all kids will lie to cover their transgressions. This is kind of universal across the world.
Do adults lie as much as 7-year-olds, or do we get a bit more caught up in the ethics of lying?
Once you reach the peak around 7, 8 years of age, we start slowly declining our tendency to lie. By about 12 years of age, the lying rate is about 60%, instead of, let's say, 100% around 7 years of age. And the decline continues to about 16 years of age. So basically, if you look at the teenager years as actually a more honest period of development.
That's so the opposite of what I would expect. What changes between teenager and adult? Why do we start to lie more again?
We come up with all sorts of ways to rationalize the lies we tell. We call it moral licensing.
Lying is a healthy part of development. We pick it up at around 2 and practice it freely until we reach our teenage years, when lying starts to get tangled up in morality. And to justify it to ourselves, we start to give lies names, like white lies. In fact, Kang has a whole rainbow of colours for understanding different lies.
White lies are lies we tell to be polite, to spare others' feelings. Grey lies are a lie we tell to cover up our own mistakes. Blue lies, a lie we tell in the interest of a collective or group. Purple lies are lies we tell to be modest, to remain low-key. Red lies are lies told out of spite and revenge.
We can give them different colours, but at the end of the day, a lie is a lie. It's a way of deceiving someone.
Hi, I'm Ian Leslie. I'm an author. I've written books about human behaviour, about all sorts of things, but my first book was about lying. It's called Born Liars, Why We Can't Live Without Deceit.
So why can't we live without deceit?
Great question. I'm so glad you asked. Well, the argument I make, amassing lots of different evidence from lots of different fields, is that lying is much more central to our existence, to our societies, to who we are as human beings, than we like to think. Almost everybody lies. A lot, right? And studies have shown, people kind of tell 2 or 3 white lies a day, right? But it's just something which is kind of woven into daily existence, and yet we talk about it as if it's this aberration or this perversion or this terrible, terrible kind of weird thing. I find that really interesting.
How many lies do you think you tell a day? 2? 3? Maybe even 5? A study shows that when meeting a new person, we might tell up to 3 lies in just 10 minutes. And Ian thinks this has been happening for a very long time.
There's a really interesting theory from evolutionary psychology called the Machiavellian theory of intelligence, right? Early humans and our sort of predecessors on the evolutionary tree lived in larger social groups than other primates, right? Now, if you're in a large social group, you have to know who your allies are and who your enemies are and what's going on. And you have to become socially intelligent. There's this kind of arms race going on where you have to detect deception. And when you deceive, you have to be good at it. Otherwise, they detect it. When they looked at kind of at ape behavior, they saw all these kind of interesting examples of deception. A young ape would be caught doing something that they shouldn't have been doing, going after the food they shouldn't have been taking, whatever, and runs up to the ridge of a hill and sort of makes a noise, which usually indicates, I can see a kind of enemy troop approaching. And all the elders kind of run after the younger one. When they get there, they realise there's no threat at all. But by that time, they've kind of forgotten why they've run up there. The ape has just made a successful kind of diversion. You see these like little micro examples of deception and deceit and dishonesty quite a lot once you start looking for them. The larger the frontal cortex, the more lying was associated. And of course, we have the largest frontal cortex of all, and we do the most lying. So it's kind of really woven into our DNA. It's bound up with our social intelligence, which is also responsible for all the kind of, amazing things that we do. But you can't kind of separate one from the other.
It's interesting that we all lie, and yet there are moral codes written into sort of all the stories we come across as a child, which are basically saying, don't lie. You have the boy who cried wolf.
There once was a shepherd boy who was bored as he sat on the hillside watching the village sheep. To amuse himself, he took a great breath and sang out, "Wolf! Wolf! The wolf is chasing the sheep!" The villagers came running up the hill to help the boy drive the wolf away. But when they arrived at the top of the hill, they found no wolf. The boy laughed at the sight of their angry faces. Don't cry wolf when there's no wolf. Later, the boy sang out again. Wolf! Wolf! The wolf is chasing the sheep! He watched the villagers run up the hill to help him drive the wolf away. When the villagers saw no wolf, they sternly said, "Save your frightened song for when there is really something wrong. Don't cry wolf when there is no wolf." Later, he saw something big, with terrible teeth and scary eyes prowling around the sheep's field. It was a real wolf. Alarmed, he leapt to his feet and sang out as loudly as he could, but the villagers thought he was trying to fool them again. And so they didn't come.
In almost every moral code, there's some commandment against deceit. So it's clearly been an incredibly important thing in any human society to punish or shame people for lying, right? And you can see why. If you can't rely on people to tell the truth most of the time, then you can't really cooperate, you can't organise, you can't get anything done. So you need to kind of find a social mechanism for stopping that and for minimising it anyway. How-to manual for living, right? Your moral commandments or whatever it is.
You're listening to Crowd Science on the BBC World Service. I'm Caroline Steele, and we're answering a question from listener Anthony, who wants to know, why do we lie, and can we lie without even realising it? In some ways, this show is a lie, or at least it's a story. We've stitched together interviews to make a logical narrative. The conversations didn't actually happen in this order, and we cut out bits so the show isn't too long. But we have a sort of unwritten understanding between you listeners and us, the Crowd Science team, that's okay. I'd like to introduce you to Ariana, a storytelling expert and medal holder from the world's biggest liar competition, who we heard from at the start of the show.
I came in second.
That's pretty good. So second in the world's biggest lying competition.
Yes, it is the world's biggest lying competition. And the world's first and foremost.
Like, how do you feel about having the title of being the second best liar in the whole world?
Well, honestly, I
Sure.
I feel like it's almost more believable because, if I was lying, why wouldn't I make myself sound better?
Commiserations. How on earth did you get into lying competitions?
Well, it's sort of in the culture around here. There's a large festival here in Charleston, the Vandalia Gathering, and they started back in the 70s with the Liars Contest.
This annual event in West Virginia, USA, is one of the busiest in the calendar.
The storytelling competition, also known as the Biggest Liar event of the Vandalia Gathering, has become a Memorial Day weekend tradition for many in the Mountain State.
And it's just one of those things I think everybody around here enters at least once. And if they don't, they've been to it to watch the people lying.
It's run by the State Department for Culture and History, which takes pride in carrying on this strong tradition of being home to the very best liars.
Good afternoon, Vandalia. Yes, it is afternoon. Here we go.
And my husband has been in it. My daughter's been in it. They've both won.
Oh.
So it was sort of, entering it was sort of self-defense, really.
Why is it important to you? What do you see as the value of lying?
It's really just the oral tradition of history and storytelling in a way that makes it palatable for others.
So something that I've learned in this show, which is sort of I've found surprising, is how important lying is socially. It's something I've always almost looked down on and been like, oh, you know, whenever anyone tells a lie, regardless of whether or not it's a white lie or a self-serving lie, I would sort of judge it as a bad thing. But I'm definitely changing my mind on that as I talk to more people about this. So I would like to get better at lying, because I would say I am a categorically terrible liar. Have you got any tips as the world's second best liar?
You have to believe what you're saying, whether it's true or not. You know it's not true, but you have to sound like you believe what you're saying. I think there are certain cues, like you said, you get nervous when you tell a lie and you wind up telling the truth right afterwards. Anyway, the closer you stick to the truth, the less your body betrays you, I think, in telling the story.
Lying is complicated. It takes a lot of mental work to do it. You have to come up with an entirely new story, and that's all going on inside our brains in a way that's invisible to people watching. Unless you're a neuroscientist with an MRI scanner.
So I'm Tali Sherratt. I'm a professor of cognitive neuroscience at UCL.
So what is going on inside our brains when we lie?
Right, so when we lie, we need to do two things. We need to suppress the truth, and then we need to make up something new.
Can you see those two things happening in the brain if you look inside it?
Yeah, so you'd see the frontal lobes active both in suppression of the truth, both in, imagining and inventing something new, which is a lie. And then you could also see activity related to emotion. So, for example, the amygdala, which is important for emotional arousal, may also be active.
So how can you go about studying what's going on in someone's brain when they lie? Do you put them in like an MRI scanner, or how does it work?
Yeah, so we put them in an MRI scanner, and we create situations where naturally people will tend to lie. One experiment that we did, we put people in a situation where if they lied, they would gain more money at the expense of another person.
And what percentage of people in that experiment do lie?
So almost everyone lies. The question is by how much?
When we lie, there's more activity in our frontal lobes, which is the part of the brain responsible for problem solving, as we suppress the truth and invent an entirely new story. And our amygdala, which is our emotion centre, fires up, probably because the fib makes us feel bad. In one of Tali's studies, she found that the more people lie, the less active their amygdalas are, suggesting the less they care. Sounds like a slippery slope.
And the more opportunities they have to lie, the more and more they lie. So from 1 pence, it goes to a pound, then it goes to 2 pounds and 3 pounds and so on. So they become comfortable with their own lying. So lying escalates. It kind of snowballs. Interestingly, people were not aware that they were doing this at all. At the end, we told them, hey, look what happened. You lied by a little bit, then you lied more and more and more, and they were not aware. So this seems to be at least partially unconscious, if not fully unconscious.
Anthony, that's the answer to the second part of your question. Can we lie without realising it? Well, yes, we can. If we lie enough, we become numb to it.
So this is something that's known as emotion habituation. By the time they get to this lie that's really large, they've already become desensitized.
To me, this feels like that's not a useful behaviour. Like, becoming desensitized to lies around us makes us, I guess, a less good judge. And I can imagine sort of socially, it's not great to lie more and more. You're going to lose the trust of people around you. Are there any advantages to this behaviour?
We see this behaviour because it is due to a basic element of the brain. So this behaviour did not evolve for lying, right? It's basically because habituation is something that is adaptive. The brain is a limited resource, so it can't just react to everything all the time. Things that don't change and do not harm us, our brain filters out so that it has resources to direct to things that are more important.
Habituation means we can become emotionally desensitized to lying. This could happen as we tell more and more lies to get ourselves out of a sticky situation, or it could happen when we move to a new culture and our behaviours have to adjust to fit in. Derek Scott, also known as Let's Double Dutch on Instagram and TikTok, makes videos about awkward social situations where honesty in his hometown of Amsterdam clashes with his experience growing up in the USA.
Well, I look at kind of Dutch language and culture and identity bumping up against different Anglophone people. There's a value in Dutch culture that's embedded in the language that the truth and direct expressions of your thoughts and feelings are important above all else.
I prefer the Dutch way of doing things, but I've dabbled relatively unsuccessfully in stand-up comedy, and I was doing it in Amsterdam, and it was awful. Oh, no. And I was like, I want the ground to swallow me whole.
Well, I'm sorry about that. Dutch people are not liberal with their laughs at any form of live performance. I think that's a cultural value because, again, they're not going to go out of their way to make you feel good. They, I think, believe that that's up to you.
And that's sort of expected, but maybe we would just all adjust if we just did it the Dutch way and everyone got used to having a little bit, I guess, harsher feedback, a bit more honesty.
Yeah.
In your experience of living in different places, where has been your favourite place in terms of levels of honesty?
I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. My family's all still there. I go back sometimes and I'm in like a store checking out and the cashier is like, how are you doing today? You know, in the Netherlands, like if you ask a Dutch person that while you're ringing up their milk, like they'll fully dissociate. They're like, I don't know what to do with this question. This is absurd. This is high comedy to them. That would be so outrageous. And now when I'm in that position, I similarly like kind of just have an out of body experience. I think I don't know what to do right now.
Interesting. It's so relative, isn't it? Do you think your level of honesty and what is acceptable just adjusts when you move from place to place?
Oh, completely. Completely. For people who have, experienced being a foreigner somewhere or had to adjust to language and culture, I think those nuances and those kind of in-between spaces become something you have to get used to and eventually build into your own sensibility and way of communicating.
Every culture has a different flavour of lying. The Netherlands might be more honest than most countries, while in the UK we are constantly telling white lies to protect each other's feelings. In Japan, there's even language for it. Hon means your true feelings, while tatimai means the behaviour and opinions you display in public. And according to Kang, the psychologist we heard from earlier in the show, in China, purple lies are common, which is where people will tell lies to be modest, maybe to say hide a good score on a test. Here's Ian Leslie again.
I think if you looked across different cultures, say different national cultures, you'd find different norms for the amount of direct truth-telling, let's put it that way, from whether you're talking about Britain versus Japan versus the Netherlands, right? You probably find kind of three different standards there of how direct should we be about telling the truth. So the amount of truth telling you do is always in relationship to the cultural norm, whether or not that's in society at large or within your relationship or the group that you're in.
Anthony, Derek, that sounds like your experience of moving between different cultures. And maybe some of you listeners can relate to that too. If so, I'd love to hear about your experiences of lying in your country, and you can get in touch with us to tell us at crowdscience@bbc.co.uk. I want to say in this conclusion that this show has convinced me that lying is a good thing, because that would make a nice story. Ariana would be proud, but that would be lying. But Anthony, I hope we've answered your question about why we do it. We lie because it benefits us personally. Maybe it stops us from getting into trouble at school or means we pay slightly less taxes. But the key thing is that we don't lie too often, so it still makes sense for society's default to be to trust what people are saying. Otherwise, life would be chaos. And before we hear the credits from Anthony, I'd like to play you the end of my interview with Derek. So, that was a great interview. Thank you for coming in.
Oh, now? Yes, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we had lots to talk about, cultural differences, honesty.
I did not enjoy it so much.
You didn't enjoy the interview?
No.
Surely there were some bits you liked. I mean, we were just having a nice conversation.
Yeah, it's too much science.
Too much science?
Yeah.
You are aware this is crowd science.
And why do you have all these questions from people all over the world?
The questions from our listeners.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the premise of the show. We answer questions from listeners.
And you told me I had to stay in this tiny little room and that I could not go to the bathroom until we were done recording.
But this tiny room is a studio.
Okay.
It's quite expensive to book. We only have half an hour. We had a lot to get through.
What is this place? Yeah, everybody makes such a big deal out of this building.
The BBC.
Yeah, I am underwhelmed.
Underwhelmed by the BBC.
Yeah.
Okay. You're very honest, aren't you?
Oh, do you think so?
Yeah, I mean, most people I interview tell me they had a great time afterwards. In fact, I think everyone I've ever interviewed has said they enjoyed themselves.
Well, I did not. Maybe they did, but I did not.
I just think maybe there's something in being polite, something in being kind, saying you had a good time, even if you didn't love all of it.
Lying?
It's not lying.
No, I would not lie like that.
That's not lying. It's not lying. That's just being polite.
Do I bother you?
No. It's been great having you on.
Yeah. I think that's a lie.
That's it for this edition of Crowd Science. Today's question was from me, Anthony, in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. If you have a question you want answering, you can email crowdscience@bbc.co.uk. This week's presenter was Caroline Steele, and the episode was produced by Robbie Wojciechowski.